So about a year ago, I did a series of videos on the maps of Gettysburg and the various war games that I have covering the Battle of Gettysburg. I have a lot of them. Gettysburg is one of the more gamed battles in military wargaming. But one of the things that I had been waiting on was to do Rick Barber's maps of Gettysburg. And I had been waiting at the time for this game, A Most Fearful Sacrifice, from Flying Pig Games, which had utilized one of Rick Barber's final map projects that he had worked on before he passed in, was it 2021? I think he passed away in 2021. And so I had been waiting for this game to release at the time. It shipped, I don't know, like a month or so, probably after I made those videos. And of course, I never got around to actually doing my review of the Rick Barber maps. I alluded to them in the video, particularly the maps for his game on Gettysburg. And this is not a game that he just did the maps for, but also a game that he actually designed, which you can tell he even did the cover artwork because this is one of his typical trademarks, this kind of elaborate script, somewhere between, not quite cursive, but it has a very calligraphic style to it. But A Most Fearful Sacrifice finally did release. In fact, now there's been a second edition of it that's been released. They printed it again and fixed things like the playraids and so forth that were printed on the wrong size cardstock, so they were illegible for, at least for the majority of people who are playing the game, who are older people who don't have the eyesight to make out tiny little numbers on intricate charts. They reprinted it and fixed those playraids, although I did not get the upgrade kit for the second edition, so I'm stuck with the old playraids. I mean, I've printed out some that they had posted that had slightly larger print on them, but it would be nice to get the upgrade kit that has like a big fold-out player-aid that's made the charts huge and much more legible. But I'd have to order that. Anyway, this is the map that I had been waiting for, the mounted. You can see it's a mounted board of the Gettysburg battlefield, done by Rick Barber. Rick Barber's maps are somewhat controversial. People either love them or hate them, it seems. Part of it is he has the best way to describe it is illustrative style. Like if you look close, his colors, like this looks like it's kind of shaded in, by crayon or colored pencil. It has this, his colors have this texture to them. His hills all have these very intricate lines and crosshatch details and so forth. The detail of the rocks and things that he draws, it's all hand-drawn. And then, again, this very, like, done in a calligraphy marker style. And then his hills that have all of these crosshatched lines showing the steep slopes and so forth. It is just a very illustrative, hand-drawn style that, in terms of wargaming and, conciseness of detail and so forth, people are either very much in favor of or can't stand. I'm in the camp that I really love his maps. The colors on here are very rich. I love the hand-drawn style, and we're in an era now where everything is done with computer graphics. The era of hand-drawn maps, and this is beyond just wargaming. This is even into board gaming in general. You think of like over on my Ameritrash shelves, dungeon crawl style games, tile-based dungeon crawling games. You think like the old Warhammer Quest, the original, which I do not have a copy of. had these lovely hand-drawn tiles that you would lay out. And now everything, you know, the modern age of dungeon crawlers, the latest Warhammer Quest follow-up, Cursed City over there, it's also a tile-based dungeon crawler, but those tiles are all computer animated, or, you know, computer illustrated, and you can see it just has, the graphics have that sort of sheen to them of computer-generated graphics that have been printed onto cardstock, as opposed to something that was drawn by hand. Pretty much every map, every illustration that's done in board gaming now is done on a computer and then printed. There are very few maps that have been hand-drawn and hand-colored the way Rick Barber's maps have been. So it is something of a lost art and a past era, and that's kind of why I like it. You know, I'm of that last generation of wargamers that will probably enjoy those types of maps. After my generation, probably nobody really cares. They just want a map that shows them what they want to see, and they don't really care that it has a computerized sheen to it, or a, you know, blandness of presentation. I think of something like the gamers maps that all look exactly the same, whether they're from the Civil War or World War II. They all have the same font. They all have the same map key showing, you know, the different types of illustrations of the different types of designations on the map. Everything looks the same, whether it's World War II or 19th century or Napoleonics or what have you. They all look the same fonts, same colors, same details and so forth. This is very clearly drawn as a map of Gettysburg. The font is intended to evoke something other than the 20th century. I don't know if Rick Barber has done 20th century era maps. I don't know if he's done a World War II map or World War I or anything else outside of the 19th century. I'd be curious to know if he uses the same, you know, hand-drawn calligraphy marker script on those maps. If he has done such maps, again, I don't know. It would be curious to see that kind of script on a World War II map. And it's just not just 19th century. He's done 18th century maps as well. He did the maps for, at least for Brandywine and Germantown over there in the battles from the Age of Revolution. I don't know of those other games in that series if he's done those maps as well. If he has, then yeah, you're looking at 17th and 18th century maps potentially as well. But this is clearly 19th century. This is Gettysburg, and his maps just are gorgeous to look at. You know, just getting back at the full scale of this. It's a massive map with beautiful colors, beautiful graphics, beautiful illustrations of the buildings and the terrain. You can get in here to the town of Gettysburg, and there are the buildings, again, all illustrated. There's his classic Rick Barber script, which, you know, you look at the word Gettysburg there and you compare it to Summer Storm, the Battle of Gettysburg. It's the same script. That is hand-drawn by Rick Barber. He even did the Compass Rose there in classic Rick Barber style. Here's where he signed it. There, 2020 was when he did this map. But yeah, the one thing I noticed on this map of Gettysburg, whereas some others that I had pointed out things like the angle and the peach orchard and the wheat field and so forth, this does not seem to cover post-battle landmarks. It seems to be this map of Gettysburg and the surrounding region as of the day of the battle, what things were called the day of the battle, because you'll notice here, Barlow's Knoll, properly referred to here as Bloker's Knoll. Orphan's End, I'm not familiar with. I know there used to be, I guess, like an orphanage there, or, you know, there's an outline of a building there. If you go there today to the knoll, there's a building there, and I believe it may have been an orphanage. That would make sense if it was called Orphan's End. But those are the names of things at the time that they existed. So if you look, here's Cemetery Hill, just south of the town. Ziegler's Grove, things that existed at the time. The different farms are all labeled with the family names. You get the Bryan Farm, the Kadori Farm, the Trossel Thicket. This was the lowlands here that at the time Sickles didn't like. He felt like he was in this low marshy land here, his line, and so he moved out to the peach orchard. This isn't called the peach orchard, you'll notice. It is just, you see the Sherfy farm there, so this would be the Sherfy peach orchard here, where Sickles put his salient out. You've got the Stony Hill there, and then Houck's Ridge, and so this is the wheat field here, but you just, unless you know where it is, it's not labeled. It doesn't look, it's not, like a gold patch here, like, oh, it's a field of wheat. No, it is just like this is the wheat field, and these hexes in here, some of the most fought over hexes in the entire battle, and not given any sort of special significance on the map. It is just things as they are. Devil's Den is identified as Devil's Den. I believe it was called that at the time of the battle. Little Round Top is pointed out here. I don't believe at the time of the battle there was any distinction made between Big Round Top and Little Round Top. And I don't think people called Little Round Top. It was just, these are the round tops, the hills south of town. I don't believe people had put much thought into it. Now, well, okay, so just what I've been going through, saying, oh, time of the battle stuff is not labeled, but here it says the Valley of Death. So clearly that was a post-battle designation. And then I just saw here the Devil's Kitchen. I don't think either of these, first of all, I've never heard of the Devil's Kitchen referred to in relation to the Battle of Gettysburg, so I'm not sure where that comes from, if that existed before the battle or not. The Valley of Death certainly did not exist before the battle. This is Plum Run that runs along here. So given that the way the rest of this battle is laid out, there's no particular attention paid that I can see to the angle or the copse of trees or anything like that. And the other question would be, the famous railroad cut, not pointed out here, but you do see the two spots on the map here where there are clear railroad cut hexes. So it's interesting that there's I can't see any of their post-battle designations until just now, when I was just literally showing you through it, that he labeled the Valley of Death here. Interesting why you would label the Valley of Death, but not any of the other things like the peach orchard, the wheat field, the angle, the copse of trees, the railroad cut, Barlow's Knoll, all these things that showed up after the battle. I'm just looking around Culp's Hill, Spangler's Knob. Yeah. Nothing else that seems to address post-battle descriptions, but somehow the Valley of Death made it on there. Interesting. And why you would do the Valley of Death and not the wheat field. I mean, just given how important the wheat field was to this battle, to what happened in these few hexes here, is interesting that you would call out one and not the other. So I'm not sure, why that was the case. It is interesting too that, so you've got, this is like the extent of the Union line here, and so you have very little room actually on this map for Confederate forces, for Longstreet's famous countermarch and so forth, to get his forces lined up along Warfield Ridge, which is where he launched his attack from on the Union left. It's interesting, there's not a lot of room there, but you've got all this room over here, like a whole quadrant of the map here, and nothing happened here. Like there were no, like aside from Union forces moving up here and up here, like I don't even think any of them came onto the map, like along these other, like this is just absolutely, in most battles of Gettysburg, just absolute dead space. Like immediately behind Little Round Top, there's just not much, you know, the Union flies guys up here and puts them up here, but nothing happens over here. So it is interesting that you have all this. I'm surprised they didn't like tilt the battle slightly, the map slightly that way, so you had more room over here for Longstreet to maneuver and so forth. You've got all this space back here, which just doesn't figure into any playthrough of Gettysburg. I don't know if there's any scenarios that cover anything that might be back there. Just not sure. But yeah, it is, you know, one of the more gorgeous Gettysburg maps there are. I don't know that I like it better than what I identified as my favorite map in the prior video, which was the 3 Days of Gettysburg map from the Great Battles of the American Civil War series. But this certainly more impressive, I think, than the Gamers maps. And then, so this was Most Fearful Sacrifice. This is the mounted Rick Barber map that he did in 2020. Here is the map from his Summer Storm. And it's a little bit bigger in terms of area, a little wider, not quite the length of this one, which is very long north to south. This has much more room east to west. So if you look the north, I'm looking at the north, towards the north here, there's Gettysburg. You go down to Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge, Little Round Top to Big Round Top. And so you can see a lot more space to the west and to the east of Gettysburg than what you see on the Most Fearful Sacrifice map. It's at a bit of a different scale. I think Most Fearful Sacrifice is basically kind of at a brigade level. This one is also, I believe, at the brigade level, but there's more opportunity for maneuver and things like that. He wanted a much less scripted Gettysburg game than what most Gettysburg games up to that point involved. He did not like the scripting because, you know, the problem with Gettysburg is that if you don't script it pretty heavily, then you don't get really the Battle of Gettysburg. Like nobody would really choose to fight here outside of the very specific conditions that brought the two armies to the fight here. So it's a different game, and so the difference of the game necessitates a much different map than what you would get for something like Most Fearful Sacrifice, which had a much different design focus behind it than what Summer Storm did. But it has all of the Rick Barber hallmarks in terms of the coloration and the illustration. I think probably the bigger issue with this map, the colors are a little less vibrant on this map. I kind of like that a little bit better. I think just from a distance, I think this map looks better than this one. And then you may disagree because the vibrant colors are much better. But I think this conveys more subtlety in the color transitions. The illustration quality is the same. It is very much Rick Barber's illustration quality. His labels are harder to read. You know, it's very hard to read Big Round Top on there. A little easier to read Little Round Top because the letters are against a lighter background. But anywhere that the letters are against a very busy background, it's very difficult to read. Like, oh, that's Black Cat Knob. Yeah, you can barely read that. I notice here, I do not see anything that says this is the Valley of Death, but that does say Hawks Ridge, and then the Devil's Den, the Weikert Farm, the Rose Farm. No identification of the wheat field though, which is, again, this is the wheat field basically right in here. Some of the most fought over hexes in the entire battle. The Trossel Farm, there's the Sherfy Farm, no identification of the peach orchard. There's the Trossel Farm, no identification of the Trossel Thicket, which on the other map was basically right here. Yeah, and he does not have, there's the Kadori Farm, the Brown Farm. My tables are at very different levels here. Cemetery Hill. Yeah, I don't see post-battle landmarks called out here either, necessarily. You have some a little more detail in the town. You see where the brickyard is identified here, so there's like a monuments and stuff there now. And that's still identified as Blockers Knoll. There's Orphan's End. So this map looks like it goes into a little bit more detail, like you see the Sheed School for Ladies there. I can't read that name, Hustman something. There's the Widow Thompson, that was where Lee's headquarters were. So there's more, there's the Pennsylvania College, Theological Seminary. So there's more individual farms and homesteads and details labeled here. Oh, this is interesting. McPherson's Hill, aka the Devil's Toupee. Now why he has that identified, I've never heard of that, man. The Devil's Toupee, McPherson's Hill. And so I'm guessing because that was, what's his name? Buford's famous, there's Devil's Toupee comment to Reynolds. And so, yeah, that's the the Devil's Toupee. Yeah, I get it. I'm not sure. I think that's probably an inside joke for Barber there on the map. I know one of there's an expansion to this game that was called the Devil's Toupee. Not toupee, but to pay, 2 words. Yeah, but just a lot more detail. And then all this stuff back here, yeah, which wouldn't be part of the fighting at all. It's just stuff that the Confederates would be moving their forces through, but all carefully labeled, as accurately as possible. And so just the level of detail that you've got, all the farms, and here's the school labeled somewhere near here is going to be the Black Horse Tavern. I think it's the Black Horse Tavern. Sachs Unsinkable Covered Bridge, just old, that's probably correct that was referred to that way at some point in the past. I'm trying to find where it was back along Willoughby Run and stuff that Longstreet did his countermarch. Yeah, schoolhouses. I mean, just every little detail, and then all this stuff over here. And I think these were added, these extra maps here, so you can do East Cavalry Field stuff. And there's also an operational map, which is almost illegible. Like this is the danger of the Rick Barber style, where all of these hexes are individually labeled. It creates a map that is almost just at a distance, like this is just absolutely encumbered by text that makes it nearly illegible. But there's the town of Gettysburg in there. So this allows for operational movement around the region. It's obviously distorted and not really a geographically accurate map. In that regard, it's more intended to allow you to show operational movement. But it does also display just the limits of Barber's particular style of the crosshatched fields and so forth, and the text, his calligraphic script does not work very well on a map of this operational scale. So I just thought I'd include that. One of the nice things though about the Clash of Arms games is their maps have that lovely this lovely knobby kind of paper that has this very antique feel to it. It's sort of a cream color. It's a heavy stock and has this knobby texture to it that's just great for moving counters around on. So if you have the opportunity to not put plexiglass over these maps, but to use removable tape or whatever and tape them down, it's a great experience moving your counters over that little knobby, heavy stock paper that the Clash of Arms games use. So that's another reason I like this map just a little bit better than the Most Fearful Sacrifice map, which, again, is gorgeous with the vibrant colors on the mounted board, lays flat beautifully, great for moving the big chunky counters on, the big hexes. Just as a little bonus I threw in, he did another Civil War map for a Paper Wars game on the Battle of Belmont, and you can see here, very detailed. There's the classic Rick Barber script, and the hand color, has that kind of colored pencil or crayon type coloring to it, and it has that texture. But you can see here he's doing fields in autumn, or whenever this battle was fought. I think it was, November 7th, 1861. So it's fought in autumn, so he's colored the map a little bit more. The trees are all where they do still appear to have leaves. Yeah, they would still have leaves on them by November. A lot of leaves would be down, but everything would have that golden hue to it, and the fields of wheat and so forth would all be golden. So another very pretty Rick Barber map of the era, but again, it's dense, just dense with detail, and that's one of the polarizing things about Rick Barber, his illustrations, is that they're incredibly detailed. You got to really be paying attention to see where the hexes are and so forth, because his detail, his illustration, his coloring, look at the grass tufts and stuff all illustrated into along the little creek here, and all the little tributaries of the creek, just incredibly packed, dense with detail. Can be visually obscuring to just basic elements of the hex, the functionality of the map and so forth. So one of the very polarizing things about Rick Barber's maps is just the level of detail that he puts in there can tend to impede the simple playability of the map. But I'm one that appreciates the level of detail, the level of care, the little Easter eggs of all the little landmarks and so forth on the maps that he loves to put in his maps. I appreciate all that stuff, even if it costs a little bit of playability or ease of playability. I'm willing to work through those things for the story that his maps tell me as I look at them. And so that's one thing I think that we lost when Rick Barber passed, was a map maker, a cartographer, if you will, although he was not formally a cartographer as far as I know, but a map maker and illustrator who loved telling a story with the maps that he provided, as opposed to just providing a simple gaming piece or gaming element. He obviously knew how to provide those gaming elements as a game designer himself, and as an illustrator for games. He knew that functionality was important, but he wasn't willing to sacrifice his illustrative storytelling in subservience to that functionality. And I really appreciate that, and I think it's something that we probably won't see again in Wargame map design.